Hello everyone, welcome to our San Diego Design Week Exploring Design panel.
And I'm Karen Morrison. I am the host of this lovely panel. I am a IGDA board member, I'm a communications lead at Creativo, and I'm here with 4 wonderful designers for the next hour and a half. They have various experiences in design, so we'll be able to hear some different backgrounds and opinions and all sorts of good stuff. And first we have, for our panelists, we have Margaret Crone, a fellow board member, CMO, which means Chief Marketing Officer of Roll For It, a tabletop RPG broadcast channel, and community marketing lead at Intrepid Studios, developing Ashes of Creation. She has a plethora of experience in the AAA gaming space and even has created her own tabletop RPG, Witches and Spellcraft. Next, we have Patrick Trainer, an indie developer, an IGDA active community member, and a winner of the highly coveted 2020 IGF International Game Festival Excellence in Design Award for Patrick's Paradox. And next, we have Norma Tu. She's a mid-level game designer at Gem City in Carlsbad, creating content for the Match 3 mobile game Cookie Jam. Her focus is on Match 3 level design, but she has a soft spot for all sorts of casual games, whether they're in mobile or not, and she has over 600 hours logged in Animal Crossing.
Me too. Legit.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
I'm proud.
And lastly, but not least, we have Jesse Snyder, a creative director at Nat Gaming, a mobile game company, and he has tons of experience in the AAA game space. Besides running the San Diego Game Dev Drink Up, Jesse is also known for his creation of Nazi zombies for Call of Duty, which is still the only COD mode I have ever played, but I haven't decided which one it is yet because I don't remember.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
He's like, thanks, Karen.
but it was cool. It was fun. It was really fun.
That's
I was
the
bad
goal.
at it.
The goal is to make fun, so we did it.
Yes, you made fun good.
Yeah.
So let's kick off this panel, and we're gonna actually start with Jesse. Let's get a little abstract at first before we get into the weeds, the nitty gritty. So how would you explain game design to someone who's never heard of it, using your own experiences as an example? And we'll go around the room.
Panel. Whew, that's a good question. It's funny because like a lot of times, like even my parents will be like, "You just make the backgrounds in video games, right?" Like people have no idea what's involved in making games. And so I kind of relate it to 2 things. One is like a moon mission, which is, it's like I got on a sweet moon shirt today for that.
Nice.
So it's like a moon mission, and that like lots of people are involved, usually hundreds of people. There's lots of testing and failed attempts, right? There's also lots of specialized disciplines, it's like, some people are in charge of flight operations, some people are in charge of ground control. There's engineers that have to figure out what batteries go on, what rocket engine to use, all that other kind of stuff, what fuel to use. So that's not, too unlike games. There's all these different specialties. Like, am I going to be a graphics programmer? Am I going to be a narrative designer, right? There's just this huge, just wide array of different disciplines. And then it feels like a miracle when it's successful. Like kind of everything, all that work and years of work builds up to like one final point, and then it's like, boom, the game is done. And it's like, what? Everyone's kind of almost shocked that it happened in a way. At least that's how I feel. Like, I feel like every game that ever gets made is a miracle, personally. It's just, I have a different view of it because I've been in it for so long. But then it's also a lot like theater design. So in that it's like, you're actually, you're creating lots of shortcuts. You're not like, a moon mission is like bulletproof, like everything has to be just right. Whereas like in game design, you can kind of take lots of shortcuts, and there's kind of things happening behind the scenes that players aren't really aware of. And so it's kind of like little clever workarounds and illusions that are happening. There's a lot of people like basically like in theater design wearing all black, like moving the furniture around, and the set pieces around. And so that's a lot like game design as well.
Except for you're in like God mode, invisible.
Right. And then ultimately, though, like with theater, the goal with game design is to keep people entertained and kind of keep them engaged, right? So keep the audience engaged. So elements of like pacing come into play. Set design is a lot like environment design for game design. Costume design and creating the characters is a lot like character design in games. Narrative is obvious, right? Like there's a lot of games that have narrative. Some don't, lots don't, but many do. So yeah, it's sort of like a moon mission in some ways. It's a miracle, and then it's a bit of entertainment. It's kind of like theater design, I guess.
The chat likes it. You're
like
like
that.
theater,
like
theater nerds in the game
Yeah.
field. I'm also a theater nerd, so I feel you.
All right. So how would you explain it, Margaret?
Ooh, I think
Using your experience.
I think you did such a good job. It's very interesting to think about how you would explain it to somebody who maybe doesn't understand game design. And I think Jesse just knocked it out of the park there.
Yeah.
But I think for me, a lot of the times what I do is I kind of talk about it in like the sense of like film or sports, because a lot of people watch those things or like experience those. And really we're just telling a story in a different medium. And, some people prefer their books, some people prefer a movie, and some people want to tell a story through, a visual game where you play like either a linear or a sandbox game, right? Or many, many forms. It's the thing with game design is that there's so many different varieties of it. I think there's kind of something for everybody. So it's hard. I don't know.
So then we'll go to Patrick, because you have a pretty different, as an indie, how would you explain game design?
Right. So yeah, that was a great explanation, Jesse, as an overview. So for me, from the hobbyist kind of space, it's really like there's all these parts, all these things you could want to do, and but you can kind of pick and choose if you're a hobbyist, like what Margaret was saying. Like everyone has different strengths, and so if you want to make you could like take an engine and get a lot of things out of the box at the sacrifice of some flexibility. You could work on focus on art. There's a lot of, you can kind of mix and match. You don't have to do everything yourself, which is kind of nice. Also, I want to link this article called The Door Problem by Liz England. And it's a really clever and hilarious read, I think. It explains all in terms of focusing on game design. It's like, there's so many nitpicky little problems you need to solve and think about that you would never ever think about as a player unless you're really paying attention.
And when you play games afterwards, it gets really strange because you notice those little things that you would never notice before because you never experienced the back end of it. Now you're like, oh, I know how that person's moving and why it's bugged, or like that kind of thing. It's very, I don't know. It takes you out of it a little bit.
I worked on a Call of Duty game where somebody wrote a 40-page design document about doors.
Oh,
wow.
So
Wow.
You're right. I mean, you're totally right. Like, it's just like, okay, we're talking about doors now. Who can open them? How do they open? Which direction do they open? Do they have physics? Like there's just so many things that like people just take for granted. So yeah.
No,
Are there items that you have to have on your person before you can open the door?
Right. What unlocks doors? What's the door language? There's a whole thing on door language.
That's exactly what this article I linked is about. It's a huge list of that.
That's cool. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll check it out.
And Norma, from the casual gaming space, how would you explain game design?
Yeah. Well, mobile is a very digestible field, so it's always good to say things in a way that is digestible. If I can't explain it to my 9-year-old little sister, then I'm not explaining it well. So pretty much what I say is, imagine you're going shopping in a store in the mall. When you walk in, it's not just a room. There is creative content there for you to enjoy. Some creative mind is behind every single article of clothing, every single clothing rack, every single section, and the way the signs are placed so that you know how to navigate your way through and have the experience that you intend to have. And that's pretty much the art of game design, finding a way to make great experiences for other people.
Awesome.
How do you like them apples? Kidding.
That's good. That's great. So next, we'll start with Margaret. And there are many different kinds of games, as we've talked about, and there's many different paths to game design. So if you could speak a little bit about how you got into game design and, where you are today and how that
Yeah, it's been a journey for me. I'm fortunate where I've gotten to do a lot of different things in the industry. I actually started in the industry because, well, feel like a lot of people have had this experience where I was going to college and I was actually going to school for healthcare administration. I have a bachelor's degree in it, and I also have a bachelor's degree in music theory, which I use neither of. And at the time when I was going to college, I was playing a video game very intensely, and I was in like the worldwide top guild and winning PvP like sports tournaments before it was called esports. Um, and I started doing a podcast where we got pretty big, and I went to an event where a bunch of developers were at, and they're like, "Hey, we love listening to your podcast, and we think that you have like the mentality of like a game designer. You should apply for a game design position. We have some coming up." And I was like, "No one wants to hire. Like, that's not a thing. People are not. You can't actually be that. Like, because I've been told for my whole entire life, you need to be a lawyer, or a doctor, or like those are the things that I need to do to be successful in life." And but I tried. I applied, I got the job, and I was, a game designer for quite a bit of time, and made a lot of games, and it was a lot of fun. And I kind of moved into more of a community role, and from then I've just continued to move into more marketing-oriented things. I think it's been a journey, and it's been fun, but I still enjoy doing design. I get to design a lot of things in my current job at all my jobs, so. I have a little bit of fun doing a little bit of both. And that's, I think, the beauty of being at an indie studio is that you kind of get to wear a lot of different hats versus like when you're at a AAA company, usually, which I have worked at, usually you have your role and you kind of stick to it. Yeah.
So, Patrick, how did you get to where you are today?
Right. So I have I'm always coming from a hobbyist background. So I'm really a hobbyist at heart. Although I happen to be working on a commercial game that started as a hobby game. I got my start making some Visual Basic toy games, but then I spent a lot of time making these fan games of a game called I Want to Be the Guy, which is this really difficult platformer that got kind of infamous on the internet at its time. And I've spent a lot of time in that community making these fan games because it's nice because they give you a lot of code to start out and you just kind of make the levels. And then gradually I eased myself into learning code. And then I discovered I really like to program. So I've gotten a computer science degree, which has taught me a lot. But I still just make a bunch of games as a hobby. And gradually throughout high school and college, I've branched out and made some non-fan games, made a bunch of puzzle games, which I'm really into. Still making a bunch of platformers. And one of those puzzle games turned into a bigger game. Yeah.
We had a good question in chat about getting the skills, if we can talk about that too, like how you add your skills as well, like how you develop them. We'll include it a little bit more later, but I think this might be a relevant path, like to add it in a little bit. So Patrick, I would say, or a guess that it was making your hobby games that increased your skill set.
Yes, and I've also heard people who are hiring for these game design or a lot of positions or programming positions or whatever, is having a resume of completed games puts your resume ahead of others. I've heard people say that many times. That shows you have the passion to see things through.
Even if it's just like a side
Absolutely.
game that you're playing, like, or that you make on your own time, like even just like a quick batch game, like that shows a lot of skill. And when we're looking for people for positions, like we can tell what went into it and the work that you did. So.
And that includes modding. Yeah.
Oh yeah, too.
Or I know Jesse can speak on that, but we'll talk about that later. But Norma, you could share with us how you got to where you are today and what skills you acquired along your path.
Yeah, of course. I was actually set up to be pre-med, but then I had a quarter-life crisis in college, changed majors, took a 3D modeling course that opened my world and made me realize I really love creating things for people to enjoy. So I went through the route of taking a computer science major with a focus in games, made a butt ton of games, and enrolled in a tech boot camp during the summer called Make School Summer Academy and learned how to make and ship my own iOS game. And from there was history. I just kept on making games, meeting great people, going to GEC, networking, making connections, and found my way at Jam City.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about how you approach game design now versus when you first started making games. we'll
Oh wait,
start with that.
do we get Jesse
I was
Oh,
gonna
on
say,
that one?
skip me.
Jesse, you get skipped.
It's
Garrett's
okay.
like,
I can talk about my.
It's okay.
I guess you could go.
I can go. It's all good.
Sorry, fail as.
It's all good. Yeah, so I guess it's funny. I was listening, and it's like a lot of you guys all have the same kind of similar stories as myself, I guess, in some ways. I guess I consider myself starting as a modder. So like I've been making games since I was like just like 6 years old, basically. And like I modded, like the first game I really got into modding was like the original Marathon that Bungie made, and like just had a ton of fun doing that. And then eventually I modded games like Return to Castle Wolfenstein. That's kind of what actually got me hired into the industry. But it wasn't like I got hired immediately. It was like I applied, they called me, they went with some other people, and then like 6 months or a year later, they called me back and they're like, hey, we really liked you that one time. We want to call you again and fly you down. And I was like, okay, cool. But like everything that was happening before that was I got my computer science degree. And I was for sure that I was going to go into like the tech industry, and it was like early 2000s. And that's when like the tech kind of bubble burst. And so there were no jobs. So I actually went into teaching. I got my master's degree in teaching, and I taught high school for like 6 months. And when I was teaching high school, like right around that winter break is when I got called by a studio called Gray Matter that eventually got absorbed by Treyarch. And they were like, hey, we want you to, work on this new thing called Call of Duty with us. And I was like, okay, I don't know what it is. Sounds good. So it's like, you guys made Wolfenstein. That sounds awesome. And this was like when Call of Duty wasn't like on anyone's map at the point, right? So like the first game I shipped was called Call of Duty United Offensive, which was the first like expansion, or the only expansion pack for Call of Duty. But I think like when I look back on it, it's like psychology from my teaching degree ended up being really useful. I actually took psychology classes just as electives because I just found it fascinating,
I had to take psychology and sociology. It's interesting classes.
And I think like this kind of secret, I think, for game designers is to learn about psychology, which rarely gets talked about, but because a lot of it has to do with how people think, and also empathizing with people and understanding like their behavior and stuff. And that's really what game design is mostly about. So yeah, there you go.
That's awesome.
And if you want to listen to a whole background on Jesse, we've done a video on IGDA San Diego on
Yeah.
Okay, so next we'll go with the now. How do you approach game design now versus when you first started? And we'll start with Patrick.
All right, so how do I approach game design now versus when I started? So there's a lot of similarities, I think, because I'm a hobbyist and I still make games as a hobby in addition to my commercial game. I just make what I want to make, and I make things because I enjoy what I have made. It's like to my taste. It's exactly what I love it, but I also enjoy the process of making it. It's like it's just I enjoy tinkering, and that's what keeps me motivated. It's just a really fulfilling hobby. And then it turns out that if other people have similar taste to me, then they might like the thing I made. So that's my motivation. And then over time, I have picked up skills like I'm a lot better at making platformer levels. I'm a lot better at making puzzles, and I understand what makes platformers and puzzle games work a lot better, so that I can better understand. Like when I'm thinking of new game ideas, they come a lot more easily, and I really understand them. But overall, I still just make games for myself.
Sorry if you can hear my cat yelling.
You should just go get the cat and like hold it up to
I know. If he comes over here, I definitely will.
Yes. All right. So next, Norma, you could speak about when you first started designing games, and now when you're what things you think about differently.
Yeah, for sure. When I first started out, I was a hobbyist like much everyone else on the panel. So I just thought about designing for me. I designed for what made sense to me at the time and what I would be okay with playing. But I quickly learned that it's very humbling as a designer to realize that your players are not you. And over the years, I've learned to design for who my target audience is. So keeping your players in mind as you design makes you a stronger designer and keeps you out of a too narrowed in headspace. That's definitely what's changed about me over the years.
That's really good. And now I'm like, look at So, Jesse, you could speak about how you designed games, and I know you have a little bit different of a role now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess like the then versus now approach is maybe it's somewhat similar to Patrick and Norma. I think you know, in the old days I was probably more just like, I'm just gonna make this thing and it's gonna be cool and I'll just kind of force it into the game one way or the other. Whereas now I'm like far more analytical. Like I think part of it was spending a lot of time at Microsoft kind of did that because they have so much user test research facilities and things like that. There's a lot of data collection that happens. And even like at Infinity Ward, we did this thing called like Kleenex testing, which is like you basically bring one person in, they play the game, and then they never play it again. They like, it's like throwing away a Kleenex, right? But the idea is that you just get like one specific point of data from one person, and then you don't get them back again. So they have like biases and things like that. So yeah, I think like like now I'm a lot more analytical. Like I want to like still have that like gut feeling of like, oh, this is gonna be awesome, but then I want to put it through the ringer of like, okay, let's have a bunch of people play it, test it, see what happens. Okay, why didn't this thing work that we thought was all really cool? Like, why didn't other people get it? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on. So, whereas before, I think maybe I would be frustrated or even like scared to do that because your ego might get bruised and whatnot, and you're like, oh, I'm a terrible designer because I can't make things good. But like, honestly, like 90% of what we do is terrible, and then like finally it's good at the end. You know? So, yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, Margaret, how do you approach game design when you first started and now where you are today?
I think all of us kind of have experienced similar things. One of the things that I think many novice designers do, and I'm a culprit of that too, is that, you know, I would get really attached to things that I created. You know, you get this idea and you think it's going to be amazing and you want to see it come to fruition. But what I've realized over the many years of being in this industry is that it's not about like me making my thing that I have an idea about. It's about us coming together as a group and creating something even better. I'm no longer like attached to things, I think is the main thing. Like my ideas and thoughts are always like, how can we all work together to make something better, right? Like now I crave criticism, whereas before like I like was afraid of it. You know, like I was like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. Oh, they're telling me this is wrong, so I must be bad at what I'm doing, right? But like now that I realize it, I'm like, oh, these are good things. Like I want feedback because now I'm to the point where like, you know, I get very little feedback. So it's, but I want more. So I think that's probably one of the main things that I think it almost is that analytical side of things where you're like, you know, you try something out and you have to test the process and see what the user experience is like. And then you're looking at that data and analyzing that data and seeing like, where did people fall off? Why did people stop playing here? You know, like what can we do to change the process to make it better? And then processes as a whole, I think like I've gotten better at being more organized with documentation and making documentation clear. I think one of the things that you learn over the many years is how to talk to people and how to write to people and communicate with them, because not every person is the same. And so sometimes you're designing for an artist and you're creating like, you're designing like an item, right? And you're now sending that over to a concept artist, and that concept artist thinks in a different way than like when I'm sending like, hey, a weapon design system to a coder. Like they're just different mindsets and different ways that they think. And I think over the years, you just learn how to communicate a little bit better to different people and empathize that way.
I think you also get better with like the disciplines as you're in it more, right? Like you might not know how to approach audio design when you're first starting, but after you've done it a while, you're like, okay, I know what kind of questions to ask. I know what kind of stuff they're dealing with, you know, what they're capable of in that. So yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, next question. A big part of game development is iteration and finding the fun. So we spoke a little bit about this in the answers, but I'd love to hear how you approach finding the fun. And we're going to start with Norma for this one.
Oops, I was muted. Okay, so finding the fun. Pretty much we have a best practice sheet that the team uses, and one of our biggest best practices is don't make things that you don't find fun yourself. So the first like threshold for fun is yourself. If you are not having fun with what you've made, there's a good chance that it's not quite fun. So just revisit what is blocking you from making progress, because people find progress in games to be fun.
good. All right, Jesse, how do you find the fun?
Ooh, that's a tough one because fun is like such a ethereal thing that just you don't. It's like hard to find, and then when you finally found it, you're just like, God, grab
Where's
it,
the
just hold on.
algorithm and analytics for
Yeah.
fun?
I
Yeah.
wish it was that easy, huh? I mean, there's some things you can always kind of go to that people like. Again, it's like the psychology stuff, but
You
I
go
don't
into
know.
a little bit of that?
What's that?
A little bit of the detail of that psychology stuff, the like what
Okay, so like for example, like on Nazi zombies, I got inspired by just sort of operant conditioning type situations. So like and like how you schedule out rewards and things. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of like, and then I was like, I happened to be in Vegas and I was doing like slot machines and I was thinking about, operant conditioning. And then that actually bled into a lot of what happened with like the zombie chest, like the magic chest thing that like opens up and spawns out different weapons and stuff. We used to call it a magic chest. I don't know what it's called now, but so sort of like, delivering rewards on schedules, like give kind of like, all right, we're going to give you a bunch of bad stuff. And then so when you get the good thing, it feels really awesome. Not necessarily bad, but it's like not as good as what the awesome thing is, right? So that you just feel, you got to create these like peaks and valleys, right? So, but that's more of like a pacing thing, I guess. Yeah, finding the fun for me is like, I think Norma had it. It's like, you got to do something that you think is fun first. And then you go to people that you think might also think that's fun. You kind of test it with them a little bit. And then you go outside of that group. Like I like to just find people in the studio that are, either they don't play the game that much or they don't know me that well, or they're, whatever. And then you hand them the game and you get like a really unvarnished, kind of unbiased view of what's happening. And sometimes you'll be really surprised by that. You'll be like, oh, this person couldn't even get through this level at all. They didn't even know which way was up. So what are we going to do about that? But I think, there's been some times that I've personally been frustrated because like we've had stuff that was really fun and it got thrown away. And I'm like, why did we do that? Like it was fun. Like that's so hard to get. And it's usually for some other kind of higher level IP reason, right? Like if it's like a, like a Halo game or something like that, it might be like, oh, these monsters don't quite fit the universe that we're, building. And so some of their abilities don't make sense narratively or whatever. So we can't do that, something like that. So that those kind of things can be frustrating because as a designer, you're like, it's just so hard to get things to be fun. Like how many games are out there that aren't fun, right? But, and it's like, and people still spent like years on them. So, it's a really tricky problem, but once you find it, you got to really hold on to it and remember that, and just to say it, like you might go to like a year or two down the road and almost forget that things were fun because you're in it so much and you're iterating through it and you start to forget, like, because you've been playing maybe the same level for like a year, 2 years. It just wears on you. So you have to kind of keep in mind that at one point this was fun and here's why it was fun, and don't kind of forget that. Don't let go of that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Margaret, how do you find the fun?
It's like everyone else said, it's kind of one of those things. It's the same as like sentiment value, right? Like I think it's always hard to quantify what is fun. Obviously, like the best way for me to do that is to put my product in people's hands. So I think a lot of times those play tests, and whether that's an internal play test or external play test, you can easily get that feedback of like if people are actually enjoying it. Obviously, you can tell whether you yourself are enjoying it or not. But I think also trying to figure out if the audience that you're going for is enjoying the product that you're creating. But the function of trying to figure out like what is that that super algorithm that allows you to create a fun experience can differ between different people. I think, like we go back to what you all were saying in regards to behavior and what things people like. I think one of the good things for people to find, and maybe this is less fun, but it's more of that dopamine kick, which is the reward. Like, what am I chasing? Why am I playing this game? And I think a lot of the times you'll find that like people will drop off when there's nothing for them to attain anymore, whether that's a title, whether that's a item that they're looking for because it's the best in slot, or whether it's killing that last boss. I think always giving somebody that thing that they are trying to attain and giving them rewards for that, and finding the right rewards for the right tasks can definitely make a big difference in fun. But like I said, it depends on the product and what that task is and how the reward plays out. So I mean, when I'm creating tabletop RPGs, for instance, a lot of it is very creative. So it's, you know, the fun is in the GM's hand of like being able to create the reward for players and creating the system that gives that reward. Versus like in a game where I'm creating like an MMO, then it's much more, it depends on the game. Like, is it item progression? If item progression is what is providing me the kick, then that moment-to-moment gameplay to get to those items needs to be the exciting thing. If it's a crafting game and my job is like Cookie Mama style, then, you know, the fun, it needs to be in that moment-to-moment gameplay in order to get me the reward of that new recipe, right? That I'm excited about. So I think to me that is a balance, and the way you make fun is finding a good balance between a task and the reward that you're getting for that task, and the time that you put into that task, and the reward making sure that it makes sense for how much time and effort you're putting into it. That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. So Patrick, while you're developing your recursive puzzle game and you know all the answers, how do you find the fun?
Right. Okay, so maybe I have a little bit of a different viewpoint here, but there's some overlap with some of what you all said. So for puzzle games specifically, it starts with the core system. I think a good puzzle game, by and large, they do. And really, the game is about showcasing that system in the most interesting, like, it has to be an interesting system to showcase, and then you make puzzles that showcase and have aha moments. And because the system is so rich, the game kind of designs itself. People kind of say, oh, that's kind of a cheesy term. So I view, and I kind of take that philosophy of starting with the core, like that's just how I approach it. That's not how everyone else approaches it. Starting with the core gameplay system and build the whole game around that, the art, the progression, how big the game is, it all follows from the core. And I think that's something that's what indie games, a lot of them are about. Like AAA games are not about this. They do different things. But I was going to say, I apply this, that works really well for puzzle games, but it also applies to platformers. So if you're making like Celeste or something, you start with the movement system and everything's built around that. And they're really elegant, and like that's what indie games do well. You hone in on this one thing and do it well. So that's what I tend to focus on. And then I don't really think about in terms of, I don't know, I just don't really, that's interesting to hear you, Margaret, because you think about things in terms of task and progression, which makes a lot of sense, but I just think about it differently, and the tasks kind of just emerge.
Well, I think in your case, you're thinking about puzzles. That is the task, right? The task is to create or to figure out the puzzle. And I mean, there's like millions of different types of puzzles that we could think about, right? And then it's, you know, what is the reward for completing the puzzle? And maybe there is no reward other than you complete it, right? Like, and
it's
that
like crossing the threshold is the reward.
Yeah, exactly. That could be the high.
Advancing inside of the puzzle, basically. You know.
Yes, and deeper than that, I think the game has to be fundamentally interesting, fundamentally something special about it, and then that's what's the intrinsic reward. It can't be some shallow game mechanic you took from somewhere or something, you know. Not to be, you know, I don't know. It's just indie games showcase special things, and that's why I love them. Yeah.
There is a beauty in indie, because I think, you know, obviously I work for an independent, like indie studio as well, and I think there's just so much passion that goes into what people create, because you're not adhering to someone else's IP or someone like a publisher's, you know, wish list and task list. You're not adhering to the money that they're trying to like pull you into, or the deals that you're going into. So there is a value in just like the pure passion that goes into creating. Which, you know, you do get that in other companies too. Like in AAA companies, you have folks who are super passionate, but you also do have like the boss man or woman coming down at you. A little different.
Excellent. Very, very fun.
We found the fun.
We found the fun. Yes.
Found the fun and finding the fun.
Yes. Oh, so meta.
Recursive
So
fun finding.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's like, very Patrick. All right, so next I'll have some specific questions, and then we'll kind of mix some questions I have, and then if chat wants to ask questions, I'll mix them in. I've been copying and pasting them into a document.
Ooh, okay.
So so first we're going to start with Margaret and ask you about the difference between a tabletop game. I like how my hands are disappearing. But a tabletop game design and like more of the video game, AAA, and all that action, something like that you think of as like super crazy high up, and then like kind of what's often used as an inspiration for games is tabletop RPGs.
What's the question exactly?
Oh, how you compare them.
Oh, how you compare them? Okay.
Yes.
They're very different. I think that when you look at tabletop games, it depends on the type of tabletop game, right? Like there could be strategy elements to it. Maybe the core combat. I think Patrick made a good point of like, you have this core of a product, and sometimes it is that strategy, sometimes it is combat, sometimes it is role play, and depending on the type of tabletop RPG you're creating, it can be based on one of those things. So a lot of the times you see people are either really focused on the strategy, or they're really focused on the element of story that you can create. The beauty of tabletop is that it's so expansive. It's all up to your imagination. Anything goes, as long as it's, something that you as a group all agree on, or your GM agree on, whoever is like leading the party. Like, you can go anywhere that you can think of can happen. And I think the beauty of that too is that all five of us could be in a tabletop RPG setting, and the way I describe it, we could all five have a different vision of what that is. And I think that to me is the amazing aspect of tabletop RPGs, which is, being able to create a world that like all of us visually see or feel and experience in a different way, versus when I'm creating something like when I was working on PlanetSide 2, right? Like, that's a totally different type of game. Yes, you have an expansive world. Yes, you have multiple planets. Yes, you have, like a combat system, and you have the element of a story in there as well. But it's very different. It's more tangible. It has linear aspects to it, even though it is a permanent world that continually fluctuates based on player actions. You have limits, right? So I think with video games, that is the difference. You have a limit. To some extent, unless you have lots of money. But that's what I find. I find like the difference often is that you have to confine a little bit when it comes to making a video game. You have to come up with like what your core systems are. You have to come up with what the process is, what the user experience is, how the UI looks, how you're going to play out in the moment, what the story is for the player, and also like what are those rewards for the player. Whereas like you do get those type of things with a tabletop RPG, but the difference is that it can kind of be a little bit more off the cuff. You don't have to have it all planned, because anything can happen. Like a player could decide to go down the left door instead of the right door, and now you have the ability to be like, yeah, there is a left door. Whereas like when you're working on a video game, it's like, well, there is no left door, so you can't go left, you're going right. I guess that's kind of like the way to explain that difference is there are.
Well, sounds like tabletop games are like more like a book. Like you're reading, like sure, there's words, and we all read the book, and we all get the same story, but we're all imagining different things, different, the way the characters look and the setting and all that stuff. Whereas like a video game is like a movie. It's like we all sat there and watched the movie together, and we all saw the same stuff, and we got different interpretations of it, but at least we saw the same thing,
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Go ahead. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, no, book plus art. Oh shoot, what's it called? Not stand up. I totally lost the word. I thought of it for a second, and then it's just gone.
Sure, I've been there before.
the comedy. Whenever you improv.
Oh, improv. Yeah.
Wow.
Improv, yeah.
I'm not very good at improv. Improv.
Yeah, I think tabletop has a lot of improv aspects to it. I mean, you can come up with stuff on the cuff and the fly. When you're making a game, yes, you can come up with stuff on the fly, but at the same time, you have limitations to that in the moment. Unless I think games are trying to be more dynamic, but even in a dynamic world, you still have systems and limitations to those systems. Whether it's like the probability of the different buildings that pop up being like 1 in 1,000, but there's still 1,000 options. That's all you have, right? Versus like with an MMO or with a tabletop RPG, it's limitless. It's up to your imagination. It's up to what you can think of and create. But there are still systems, right? Like there's still like in any other game, like you have a system of combat. You're still going to make a system of combat if you're having combat. Otherwise, if you don't have rules, that's what they both have in common, is a set of rules. You have to have rules. Otherwise, you have no guidelines for like how you win or how you lose or how you how you get that reward.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right. So my next question is for Patrick. I had the honor of seeing your early stages of Patrick's Parabox, a recursive puzzle game. Can you take us through how you approached designing the game from this is neat, it does this thing, how do I make a game out of this?
All right. Well, thanks for playtesting way back then. That was useful.
Yay.
It's grown a lot since then. So yeah, I'll just give an overview of like designing a puzzle game, which is a kind of, I'm gonna say formula, but that doesn't make the game less special because there is kind of a, I don't know. I love puzzle games, even if they kind of have a similar structure. So with a game like Parabox, or like a game like Baba Is You, or a game like Steven Sausage Roll, these very well-regarded puzzle games, kind of you start with the core, which is like some puzzle system, and that's then the biggest step is exploring it, and that means making test levels, trying stuff out, making a bunch of puzzles, seeing what works, what doesn't, tweaking the mechanics because you're like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if it worked like this instead? And you have to throw away all your levels so far and then make new ones. It's about exploration, and that's a big iteration phase. And then once you get further along, then you can start making some finalish levels that are intended to be final. You start playtesting those, working on the art, all the other parts of the game. And the exploration is still going on there. You're still maybe discovering new mechanics, but there's a lot big exploration at the beginning. And it's interesting because that exploration, things you discover, are then things you package up and then show to players. Like, here's a puzzle that showcases this discovery I made. Here's a puzzle that showcases this discovery I made. So it's a lot of, the way I like to sum it up is playing a puzzle game on hard mode, because you're using the same exact muscles in your brain, discovering things and trying out theories, but then you have to make the game. It's like you're doing all the work instead of just solving the puzzle. It's just, there's kind of a funny parallel there. So yeah, about exploration.
That's great. This is sort of related. I'm going to sneak in one of chat's questions. It's kind of a long one, so I'm going to paraphrase. It's from JKA. Is there a way to avoid iteration? So I'm just going to kind of add this in right now. For example, poets don't release their poems to hundreds of testers over and over before releasing the final version.
Yeah, I mean, you could just release your product. I mean, that is an option. You don't have to test it out. But I think like the main process is concept. You create your concept, you design your concept, you make a prototype of your concept, and then you test it. I mean, that's all games. I feel
Ultimately,
like
it's
all
technology.
of us have that process.
You know what I mean? It's like ultimately it's technology, and so you can't just let technology go untested, right? Whereas a poem, you could write it, sure, you know, that's all good. But like like anything can go wrong with software, and it often does. And there's all kinds of things you hadn't accounted for, and you know, there's so many permutations of the way that things can shape out that you just don't know. So you have to test it. You just have to.
Think about this. I think Jesse gives a great example. Think about every one of you that's watching this, every one of us here. If we were all to list out our PC specs, we'd all have different PC specs. Now you're creating a product, right? That needs to be able to play on all of our PCs. And it needs to be something that has good performance, that looks visually appealing, that is fun to play, and that isn't like broken. It's a much different than I think you could maybe get away with a tabletop game of just releasing it, but I think the problem with that would still be the same case where, you know, yeah, sure, everyone has the dice, they roll the dice, and if they, you know, what if they fall into like a lot of cracks where like now all of a sudden there's a class that's broken that just overpowers everybody. Now everyone's just going to play that class. So then you have a system that is just everybody's playing a mage, right? Like that's the difference. It's the level of polish that you're going to produce to somebody.
I was just going to say, think about like games that come out and still have problems after all the testing and money. Like Call of Duty comes out and the people are going underneath the world and shooting people through walls and stuff. And it's like, you know, the devs are like, like trying to fix it. And that had been through like multiple rounds of QA for, you know, potentially years, and still something happened, right? So, yeah, it's really an unavoidable kind of sort of a necessary, I wouldn't even call it evil. It's necessary goodness that we have to do all this testing to ensure that the quality of the product when you get it is awesome, and you guys are having fun, and nobody's getting distracted by, you know, rough edges or getting stuck in places, or, you know, getting unimmersed or not having fun, you know.
But like we said, like I said earlier, like you can do it without. You
Sure.
could just release it. Like there's nothing
Nothing's
stopping
stopping
you
Yeah.
from just releasing your product with no testing. But
Good luck.
have fun.
Yeah, and to be fair, and often even so like a poet might do that if it's short, but writers will have beta readers.
and readers.
And-
Yeah.
Oh, they go through revisions and everything.
They go through
Yeah.
revisions. There are writers that will just write, but there's like it's like 1 in 1,000. So if you are that person, you could be awesome. Like, oh shoot, what's his name? He wrote Skinny Legs and All, but I can't remember his name right now. Anyway.
Stephen King. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. So he's known for he would write on a typewriter and then write, and his typewriter got stuck and on like R or something. So there's straight up a page of R, and it's a published book, and you can purchase this.
I was
Robbins,
talking
that's-
about typewriters the other day because I love the tactileness of typewriters, but that is a problem. Is like once you make a mistake, you're screwed.
Yeah, but playing a game, if your thing gets stuck on R, people would be very angry and want their money back. Anyway, so carrying on. Norma, so my next question is for you. User experience is a big part of mobile development in general and also mobile games. And it's true of all games actually, but very highly, focused on aspect of it. So if you could speak a little bit about how you approach designing for user experience for mobile.
Yeah, of course. It all starts with making user stories. And for those who don't know what those are, that's when you make a literal persona of what you imagine your player to be and take that persona and experience your game through that lens. So for Cookie Jam, our typical audience is like a grandmother in her 50s who just has picked up her kids from the parents' house, and it just has a small moment of calm to relax. So with that in mind, we try to make levels that people can enjoy at a relaxed pace and not get horrendously frustrated with. So user experiences start with user stories, and there's lots you can do when it comes to the mobile space. There are lots of ways you can research how certain things are done, but at the end of it, it just comes down to if you have made an experience that matches your user stories you've made for this specific case.
Do you test them? Like, do you test with those specific people, or how do you figure out if your user story was right?
Well, that's sadly not in my department. We do have consumer insights with Jam City. We have them bring people in and talk to them and try different things with them. However, that's something that I don't necessarily have much insight about.
You get data.
For sure.
We'll like try to get that.
Or data.
Yeah.
Anytime you
Data.
can get data, it's like we're data junkies. We just want it all. Give it. I mean, when it comes to design logs, like you're constantly you want logs for everything. You want every action and every experience, and not even just game design. That's like on the web, on mobile, any platform that you have that a user's on. You want to know exactly what they're doing at every moment possible.
For sure.
Yeah, that's an entire focus in itself is data collection.
I love you,
But-
BI
Yeah.
people.
Yep.
And then interpreting that data. So yeah. So Jesse, now you are in a mobile game company as well. How do you compare designing at a AAA studio to, like 4 consoles and, controllers to handheld devices? Uh-oh, I think are you muted?
Yeah, I think he's muted.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Is that better?
You're very, very
Yeah,
quiet.
really quiet. What happened?
I know.
You're just really quiet. We hear you.
No,
though.
it's still quiet.
Oh, technology.
The joys. Now, no. Ooh, now we hear you, but very quiet.
Yeah, he caught my thing.
Is that better?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
perfect.
All right, I'm using the different mic now, so I mean, you might have to endure my children screaming in the background, but so AAA versus mobile. I mean, they're very different in lots of ways. I think AAA is usually focused on kind of a an experience that's already been delivered in a lot of ways. So like games kind of typically grow into AAA games, like Call of Duty and Halo and those kind of things. Like they obviously didn't start quite that way, but now they are. And so once you've established that, now you're sort of making sure that you satisfy the audience that already exists. Whereas in mobile games, that might be true to some degree, but you have a lot more latitude to kind of try out new things because the expectations aren't as quite there. And I think with mobile, you're kind of seeking an audience, or guessing that there's an audience out there for your game, and you're trying to figure out who they are and who's going to play it. There's also a bunch of other things I can think of, like AAA games usually have this high cost associated with them, and it's kind of interesting to think about like where all that money goes, right? Like there's a lot of money spent on like R&D for like new features. There's like narrative and story that have to be delivered, so there's entire like PCAP or performance capture volumes set up with actors and all this equipment that goes with it, which you would never have to deal with that in a mobile game. The marketing budgets are insane on AAA, like hundreds of millions of dollars, and marketing has a lot more to do, I think, with AAA games than in mobile games. Not that it's not important, but I think just a much different take on how marketing is delivered. AAA games are often about like high-end features, right? So like the best graphics, we have super low latency networking, the best photogrammetry, whatever you can imagine, right? Realistic effects, big servers on the back end for all kinds of stuff. I also think that like AAA games are just honestly, I think they're more chaotic, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but there's a lot of pressure to succeed, which can make people fold or turn into other people that they never thought they could be. There's bigger egos, I think, in AAA games. There's the stakes are higher typically, or at least they seem higher, or they're the perception is that they're higher. I think AAA games are a lot more stressful too. Like since I moved kind of away from that, my quality of life has just gone way up. There's a lot of pressure from like communities, right? Like make sure this Call of Duty is amazing, that kind of stuff, and it can start to wear on you. And also just knowing that you can't change it that much. You can change like a Call of Duty game a little bit, but if you change it too much, people get upset. So, and really like a lot of like AAA stuff is around experience design. So like we're thinking of these like big experiences that we want people to have, which can include like actors and gameplay and just like tons of different elements that have to be kind of moving in concert, right? And I actually think that AAA has a smaller audience relative to mobile, but it's more engaged in a way. So like people are just more hyperactive about what happens in a AAA game and like its release and the lead up to it, and then it's out and they're like, oh my God, the game's out, we're all talking about it. That doesn't really happen in mobile games as far as I can tell. It kind of comes out, people like it, and they have a lot of fun. I guess like the flip side of that is like mobile games to me are more about just pure fun, like just the essence of fun, whereas AAA games are fun mixed with other things. Mobile games, I think, tend to be a little bit more, like I would say almost disposable, not negatively, but just like you play a mobile game for a short amount of time and then you move on, and then you maybe play another mobile game. And there's not a lot of mobile games that people will play for like years on end, right? And form communities around. That's not completely true. Like if you play a game like Pokemon Go, there's like tons of people that play that. There's communities around it. But I think it's like not as, doesn't happen as often. There's different devices, obviously. So like with if you're making like a AAA game, you're on a console. So, it's like, hey, we're making this game for a PS4. We know kind of what the specs are. Somebody mentioned earlier the different specs. I think it was Margaret, like with PCs. I mean, that's true for mobile games too. You got all these different sets. Do we want to design it in landscape mode? Do we want to do portrait mode? What's the control and input going to be like? How are we going to do movement? Like, are we gonna do movement where you like tap to move, or are you gonna do whole, stick virtual joysticks? I mean, there's so many different ways to think about movement and stuff. And then there's issues like fast follow. So like on mobile games, like you'll come out with a successful mobile game and somebody will copy you almost immediately, steal your formula and move on to other stuff. Whereas like you can't really do that in AAA games. Like AAA games draw these big moats around like their territory, right? Like Call of Duty has some of the best shooting mechanics in the world. Battlefield tries to encroach on that, but then they have to like figure out ways to not be Call of Duty as well. You know what I mean? So there's also, I think with mobile, there's more room for innovation. Like you can, it's kind of to the indie point. Like you can just iterate through things faster and try ideas out faster and find the fun faster. And yeah, I think there's a wider audience in mobile which potentially could translate into like more dollars. But it's a less hardcore audience than some of the AAA releases and that kind of thing. So,
One thing that was pointed out to me that's interesting is the word of mouth. So there really isn't word of mouth for mobile games. It's not like people are like, oh, hey, have you played the latest?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe a little, but not in the same way as
not the same. Yeah.
Well, you also have to think about the time frame in which products have been available to folks. I think mobile games are fairly new, like, they're babies in this industry, and you're going to see that change a lot too, especially with like the way that technology has grown. I mean, look at what we're seeing now. We're seeing a lot more MMOs that are coming to mobile, which is something that like people never really thought was going to be a thing. And building games like Minecraft on your phone. Like, there's just so many things that like weren't available and that are now. I mean, I grew up in an age where cell phones weren't a thing. So,
Same, yeah.
like I think like when technology changes, you're going to constantly see the progression of entertainment change.
It's true. Excellent point. All right. So make sure that we have time for chat's questions. I'm going to put them before my ending questions. So I saw there's people in chat that are answering some of them, which is excellent. And thank you. So ABC King says, I'm 13 and I create games as in a board games or maps in Fortnite creative mode. What steps should I take to become a game designer? It's a pretty broad one, but so if you are 13 and making maps in Fortnite, what are some other things that you might be able to do? This is for everybody.
That's a tough one. Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
He was already Linsplay already answered. Sorry, I don't know why I said he, but yeah, Linsplay already answered, gave some good advice, and also said you're already a game designer because technically, yeah, you're making stuff, and that's fun. You're doing it. One piece of advice I've heard that I really like is maybe you have a comfort zone, like it's making this kind of Fortnite map or making this kind of a thing. And then but it's nice to try to make something just outside of your comfort zone. Like, oh, I'm going to try this new thing this time, or I want to do this, try a new thing this time. And maybe that's trying a different medium, or, just you'll get bigger over time. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
But yeah, have fun.
If I was 13, I would download Unreal Engine, I would download Unity, and I would just start playing around trying to make stuff, or mod a game. I mean, doing that Fortnite stuff is like the closest to modding a game you could probably get these days. But if there's another game that you like that has like moddable capabilities in it, then like by all means, like start there too.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You're already a designer. But in regards to like moving into professional realms, I was going to say the same thing as Jesse. Like, download an engine and start playing around with it. I mean, you can purchase marketplace items, you can create your own, you can download free assets, and you can kind of create whatever it is that you're trying to build, and just build stuff. I think a lot of it, when it comes to portfolios and what people are looking at, they're looking at like what your design theories are. They're looking at how you solve problems. And I mean, obviously you're really young, so you still have some time, and not every company is going to want to hire somebody who's that young, but hey, you could be the prodigy, and maybe you make your own game and you kick butt, and all of us are now like playing your product. I think that would be amazing to see happen. And if you need any advice, come hang out. I know that like we have a lot of people who at IGD San Diego are willing to help out and kind of be mentors to you. I think we even have kind of like a mentor program, right, Karen? Because I know we've done some classes with kids that we've done.
Oh, well, that's through Link.
Yeah.
That's me. That's a different thing. That's AIGA.
Yeah.
But,
so there are programs like that. I would say, like,
yes.
Join part of those, network with other kids that are your age who are also interested in that. Together, maybe you're really good at like the tech side of it, but you find a friend who's really good at the art side of it, and now you guys are creating something even more magical than you did before. But you're already doing it. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And if I may?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Norma.
Oh, sorry about that. I was going to say, yeah, you're already a designer. If you're making content for games, you're a game designer. But you don't necessarily have to start from scratch with game engines like Unity and Unreal. You can certainly go into games with user-generated content like Roblox, Minecraft, exploring those kinds of things. I already have everything for you to dabble around with, like Mario Maker. Go ahead and make a bunch of levels and let people play those levels you made in Mario Maker. You don't necessarily have to wait until you're a genius coder to make games. You can just make games.
I'm just going to add really quick that learning to write code in some form or fashion would also, be useful if that's something that you're interested in. There's like lots of kind of free stuff online. I think you can go to Code Academy and learn, some pretty in-depth stuff. And then also potentially even like 3D modeling. So if you pick up some sort of modeling package and play around with that, because ultimately I think what you're going to get into is like at least I found anyone who can do like either 3D modeling and or coding and loves making games will just have a much brighter future as a game designer, because they can create a lot of their own content and kind of show it off and say, hey, here's this thing I did. Like, what do you think? Okay, let me change it. What about that? It just gives you more tools to kind of help grow into that type of person, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah. So next, we have a question from Frostlandia. I'm curious how the panel interprets data if they get their games about player habits, or what sorts of learning moments have taken place as a result of new data. Interprets data, from their games about player habits. How you interpret data. Well, I think I know who you are. Frostlandia, are you still here? I'm not completely sure I understand the question, but I copied it and I was like, this seems cool.
I think it's, when we get data from our games and how we figure out player habits based on that data, and also what do we learn from those moments, and how do we utilize the results of that data, which is a lot. So I think it just really depends on what that data is. I deal with data a lot. I love data. It's like my jam. But I think from my perspective, like obviously first you can get a lot of data, but if the data is unreadable, like that's a whole nother level. So you actually have somebody who has to kind of like go in and make that data in a format that is readable to people. And then you take that and you assess it. So I think it just depends on what it is. If it's combat, like you're looking at, weapon logs, you're looking at movement logs. For instance, I'm going to use PlanetSide 2 as an example. We had maps, like heat maps, so we could see kind of like where people were dying, where the choke points were, where people were getting held up, how long people were taking in certain areas, how long the battles were, and kind of looking at like capture times for different layouts and like those type of things. What you learn from those is whether like, hey, maybe I need to add more cover here because people keep dying in this spot because it's too wide open space and there's not like half cover and full cover and third cover. So I need to add more spaces where people can kind of move along and get to the point because it's taking too long to capture that point. That's like a very simplistic version of that. But there are like so many different types of data that I mean, like when you're looking at web data, you're looking at how long someone stays on a page versus like where they got hung up. Did they actually register for your game? Maybe they like started filling out portions of it and then they stopped, or maybe they registered and then after they registered, they never came back. And why didn't they come back? Or like when you're looking at levels, maybe it's when we look at like EverQuest and EverQuest 2, when we were like kind of looking at those games and how do we get people to come back, or where were people falling off? Like maybe it's like level 15, people stop playing at level 15. Why? Let me go look at where players fall off. What quest did they all stop on? Is it all the same quest? Maybe we need to go look at that quest. Oh, there's a bug with that quest. Let's fix that so that people can continue to progress. So I mean, I gave like a few examples of that, but I think there's just hundreds of thousands of variables that go into data and how you would analyze that data. Solid enough.
Oh, that was interesting. So we currently have a list of like 7 questions stockpiled from the chat, but we're still adding new ones to the list as people ask them.
So next I've got Creative Canon. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of design philosophy advice, or design philosophy that you find valuable now and wish you'd discovered earlier in your career, what would you share? You could go back in time and tell yourself something. What would you say?
This isn't design advice, but it's something I really want to say. I think Margaret mentioned this earlier. It's like, don't take criticism harshly, because I took it really harshly when I got criticism or when I didn't get any response at all to my games. But I just, over time, I developed a thick skin and didn't let it get to me personally. Yeah.
Criticism often comes from a place of passion.
I was going to say the same thing, so that's why I'm not saying anything, because
You're like, I like it.
because that's, I think every designer has to go through that though, right? Like you kind of have to be forged from the fire. It's hard. It's such a hard thing to tell somebody. You really have to go through it, you know? And I think maybe the advice would be go through it and then, but don't beat yourself up over it, I guess. Like it's tough because I still have like traumatic nightmares of, you know, playtests and things like that, where I'm like, I can, you know, like, or nightmares about like this playtest went horribly, what happened, you know? Yeah, I don't know. That one's tough because there's a lot of lessons, but you just kind of have to go through it to learn some of them. I don't know.
Or did you?
Yeah, for sure. I would say don't be married to your ideas and watch out for doorknobs. And what I mean by doorknobs is a good mentor of mine in game design told me that when I was starting out, I tended to do doorknob design, which was, imagine somebody tasked you with building a house and you were so fixated on making the most ornate, Victorian, elegant doorknob that you forgot about the rest of the house because you were so zoomed in on making the doorknob. So it's important to make sure you take a step back, look at the big picture, and realize that there are bigger priorities than the one thing you're fixating on at the moment, and maybe you should take a break from, or not be so attached to, because it might need to be scrapped in order for the game to be a good game.
Yeah, I agree that like my main lesson would be to not be like, I think not be married to your ideas for sure. Like, you know, it's not your baby. Like, you're gonna be okay. It's gonna actually, your baby's gonna grow up and be even better than it was before. So I think that's kind of like the perfect way to put that. And I think beyond that, being okay with redoing things. I think often like the times we go through steps of process, right? Like you're like, here's my goal. I'm trying to make my goal happen, but it's like everything I do just doesn't keep working. Maybe you need to recess it, right? And I think being okay with like recessing and wiping something and restarting can be a good thing. It can be hard because starting over sucks, and sometimes that means you're putting in overtime or extra hours. But in the end, you're going to be happier with it rather than putting a Band-Aid on something.
Absolutely. Okay. So next question is actually for Jesse. So zombies was a pretty radical departure for COD at the time. How was the studio leadership convinced to make such a radical change? Oh, this is by Whamcoincy. Anyway, how was the studio leadership convinced to make such a radical change at the time? What did it take to get a feature like that from concept to launch in AAA?
I actually think Zombies is a bad example of how to make a game. I mean, I'm proud of it and all that stuff, but it came like around the alpha or beta period of making World at War, and it only came to be because an executive producer stepped in and said, hey, we need to come up with another game mode, basically because like Modern Warfare had one, so start thinking of stuff. And I was like, okay. And then it just sort of kicked around in my head for a couple months, and then like we were trying out different stuff and things weren't working, and then I just sort of had this crazy idea. It's one of those aha moments where you're like, oh, what if, because I was working on a level that had like these animations in it that kind of looked like guys that were zombies because they were like Japanese soldiers that had been bombed, and so they were kind of shuffling around like zombies. And at one point we said, oh, that looks cool, that looks like zombies. And then we also had co-op in the game, so then it was one of those weird like synergistic sort of moments that just, you know, comes into your head and you're like, okay. And I remember I sat a producer down and I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And they looked at me like I was just the craziest person, like, please get out of this building, like never come back again. And I was just like, what? Like, to me, it sounds so obvious, like this is cool. But you have to keep in mind that like Call of Duty at that time didn't have crazy stuff in it, right? Like it was all World War II games up to that point. And we were like kind of the last of the World War, like right at the end of the World War II game cycle, you know, because Modern Warfare was coming up. And so I sort of personally felt like World at War wasn't going to be like this great game. Like we need to do something to really make it stand out, to kind of push. And also there's other things in there, like Treyarch as a studio, I was trying to push them to be more creative and whatnot. And so it was actually a big fight. It wasn't like I went in there and was like, hey, let's do this. And everyone was like, yeah, let's do it. It was kind of like, I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to start making it. And then some people saw it and they were like, ooh, I want to help out with that. And it created a bit of like friction within the team. And then at one point they actually took it away from me and I was like, okay, because I was lead designer, I had other responsibilities. But then I was like allowed to go back on it and kind of finish it out with some other folks. But yeah, it wasn't like a pleasant experience, I would say. It was actually one of those things that like afterwards everyone kind of looked at each other and said, all right, like, are you sure, you know, is this I don't know about you anymore, you know, this kind of stuff. And there's some other factors leading into that. Like there was a lot of people that left the studio around that time. A lot of good close friends, they went off to like Respawn and Infinity Ward that later became Respawn and stuff. And so I kind of looked around, I was like, oh, there's not a lot of people I'm working with anymore that I've like trust, you know, for a long amount of time, that I've worked with for a long amount of time. I need to kind of go seek other opportunities. So then I took off. But I mean, honestly, I had no idea that it would still be around today. I mean, that's what's crazy about it is like, you just, like Margaret said earlier, like your babies will grow up and be better than you ever imagined. Like that's like zombies in a nutshell, really. So.
And someone else will raise them.
Yeah. That's true.
It is crazy, like whenever you leave a game, like especially when you're there from the beginning and you create something and then you get to see the people afterwards, what they do to it. Whether that's like good or bad, it can go both ways, but it is always interesting.
Yep.
And another question from the name that I'm going to butcher. So, Wham Coinsey. So also, what book would you recommend to any game designer that's necessarily related to game design? I've seen people in chat recommend some, but I wanted to see if there's any books that y'all might recommend.
This isn't strictly game design, but there's a book called Joel on Software that it's more of a management kind of book. So maybe it's when you're starting to work with other designers and stuff, but it's a good book to just kind of look at like hiring process, like who to look for when you hire people, how to estimate people's times, you know, and how to work with people when they estimate their times, like how long does it take for them to like complete a task. And the kind of secret is that like basically everyone's a really bad estimator of how long things will take. So you go like, oh, this is nothing. It'll take me 2 hours. And then like a week later, you're like, people are asking you like, what's going on, you know? So Joel on Software covers a lot of that stuff, which is it's more of a broad software book, but games are software. So, and it's actually, I don't think it's too hard to read. It's a pretty easy read. So he's also got a blog. He's got a lot of the stuff on his blog. You can just search for Joel on Software. That's a pretty decent one.
Any other recommendations?
Got two.
Yay.
So first one, Game Design Workshop by Tracy Fullerton. That was actually the textbook that was part of my games program, and I love that book like it's my Bible. And another book is Design of Everyday Things by Dawn Norman, and that takes a more UX look at things outside of games. I'd recommend both if you want to start building up your designer mindset and designer eye. And I'd like to also throw out a YouTube channel, Game Maker's Toolkit, very good resource.
Any other?
Did you have any?
Do not have any.
Oh no.
I'm looking at my stuff, like what I've kind of went through. Some really interesting. I mean, if you're interested in just like you're just trying to find other books to read and stuff, I'll just list off a few that I have here, which is The Agile Samurai: How Agile Masters Deliver Great Software. I think it's just an interesting book if you're interested in like. I'm very interested in how to organize and process things because I think like it makes a lot of difference in how well your product ends up, because I think like a lot of the times if you don't assess your deadlines properly and your pipelines aren't right and you're not making accountability for the time that is needed in order to assess new technology that you're addressing, quality assurance testing, I think a lot of that makes a big difference. So that to me is a interesting book if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And on that front, Chaos Monkeys, Obscene Fortune, and Random Failure in Silicon Valley. Like there's a lot of learning lessons that you can learn from other people's failures. And I think a lot of the times we don't take the time to like look at how someone else didn't do well and how we can do better through learning through their mistakes. Don't make those same mistakes, and I think like sometimes that can be really helpful. And also like social networking and how important it is. I think How to Win Friends and Influence People is a very interesting read, just because, you know, you're dealing with a lot of people. You're basically almost like doing little mini forensic speeches with people, because a lot of times design is like, we both have the same idea, or we both have different ideas of how combat should work. And it's a minuscule thing. It's like, how long should block be? And I am going to like give you my expose on how long I think block
My God,
should
there
be.
goes 2 hours.
Yeah, and it can go for 2 hours. It can be like, no,
Yeah.
I think it should go this long. I think it should have like a bar that fills up that, you know, like there's so many ways you could do just a simple.
What's the shape of the bar?
How long is the animation? How, you know,
Right.
like, do I stand still? Or can I move? Like, there's so much that can go into it. And I think being able to talk with people and be effective is very important. So I think that is kind of an interesting one. And one more that I want to share. I've listened to a lot of these things. Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. I think that's also a very important thing, because we build a lot of habits as designers, we build a lot of habits as people, and a lot of the times in order to better ourselves, we do need to make change, and that can be very hard. Like we were saying before, with being able to give up that power of like, I don't own this, it's something that we are working together on. And that's a habit. That's a habit you get into where you're like, this is my baby. I think that's all I got.
So, Mommy Player asks, what are your favorite games?
I hate favorites.
There's so many good
witness.
I
ones.
know.
Put an S, so it's games.
It's like in what
Can we
context,
do like top
right?
five?
Yeah.
Can we do?
Yeah.
Can we each do top 5 or something?
Sure. However many you, within reason, want to.
Does someone have their top 5? I can go off mine.
Go for it.
Okay. I have to say that EverQuest was my first. It is the reason I'm in this industry. It's the reason I started working for Sony Online Entertainment. It's the reason I got into this like, whole thing, is because I have had this love for art, like, you know, living in this virtual world, and it was one of the first games that I ever played. And I think that, you know, a lot of people haven't gotten to experience what that was like before, because OG days, you didn't have a map. Like, I'm a very OCD person. You're gonna learn a lot about me in 5 seconds. I had a map, and because you didn't have a map in game, I would like put little like pins wherever I had traveled, so I knew the path that I went on. And then I had like a notebook, like a binder with like all the quest things, everything that had been done, because like people would ask, and I'd be like the Wikipedia of everything. Like I was the scribe of our guild. Like I knew where everything was. And I think, you know, that to me, I think is like people having to rely on you, and like the element of community, and the fact that like I have like friends all over the world who I met through this game. Like that to me, just mind boggling. Beyond that, I think Dungeons and Dragons. I have played it since I was a little kid. I love tabletop RPGs. It's one of the reasons why I literally play like in 5 or 6 campaigns a week. Like I'm a crazy person. I'm addicted. Contra, it's just like, there's something about Contra and like the element of like design and the beauty of the simplicity of it, and still the complexity of like how hard it is, that I absolutely adore. I have to have that on my list. Battletoads, just because I fucking love Battletoads, and like the fact that you could play it with a friend. I just have so many good memories of it. And I think my last one is actually Animal Crossing. I never thought Animal Crossing would actually be something that I loved, and I did not play it from the beginning when the first game came out. I did play the first game, but it was because I was playing it for market research. I was working on a video game called Free Realms, and some of you may know this game. It was a predecessor before I started working on Clone Wars Adventures. But it was my first time kind of making a game for kids, and I had to like, I really wanted to understand. So I was like playing a lot of games that were in that market, like Wizard 101, a Club Penguin. I was just playing every game that I possibly could. And I got to the point where I was playing Animal Crossing, and I was like playing it in bed, and my partner's like sleeping next to me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I just can't stop playing this game. It's like so simple, but so like, I love every moment of it. I just want to shake all the trees. Like, don't ask. Like, it just built my OCD. So
Girl, I know that
those
feeling.
are my 5. Very different games, but I love all of them. StarCraft's like a really close 6th one down there.
Would we want to move on to the next question? I feel like
I know. We got a
better
bunch.
ones
We have a bunch.
Sorry.
Maybe or what? If anyone wants to say one, you
The
get one.
witness.
Pokemon.
Oh,
I'm
Pokemon.
gonna say one really quick. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
say one.
Oh, I'll say one. Okay. Kerbal Space Program. The end.
Yeah,
Excellent.
okay.
Okay. And what is a good way to get your foot in the door if you don't have much experience? I'm currently in school, but I don't qualify for game design positions yet. I have a BA in English, creative writing emphasis, but I'm just now taking classes in game design. And this was GemMab.
I kind of mentioned this earlier, but like 3D and code, like something along those lines if possible. I mean, really, you have to get your foot in the door, you have to create something first and show it off and say, this is what I made, you know? And it's even more so for like the bigger studios because they really want to see something that's in line with what they're already making. So they kind of can already kind of pre-trust you with like the whatever they're making. So like I think you know, like if you work at Naughty Dog, they're gonna give you tests and things for that are a lot more like adventure game type stuff. IW, like Infinity Ward, they're gonna do more. Hey, create a shooter level for us, right? As like a test, for example, like a really simple shooter level. So yeah, I don't know if that helps at all, but
Network.
There's no easy answer for this.
yeah, create
No.
something though
It's
is the key.
Make a thing.
Create things.
Yeah.
Make things,
Start making-
plural.
Do
Yeah.
the thing and make friends.
Yeah.
Both of those have to happen simultaneously. Because I
Yes.
wouldn't have the job I have today if it wasn't for the meaningful friendships I made at GDC through connecting with people. So networking isn't just, hey, give me a job. I hear you work at this place. I need
Please
a
do
job.
not do that.
Nudge, nudge, help. People get like, whoa, back off. I need personal space. So make friends. Even if you're in the thick of it, like deep in your game, don't forget to remember that there are other people out there that can become worthwhile connections.
And it's fun.
Yep.
Well, all right.
Make things
So-
and make friends. Oh, I like that. That's cute.
Yeah.
Make the things, make friends.
It also sounds like Animal Crossing.
Yeah, it does.
Crafting.
True.
All right. So, who are some favorite? Okay, they say favorite design. Creative Canon asks, who are your favorite designers, developers you've worked with? I'm just going to kind of change that so you don't have to be so specific because you don't want to like. If somebody you've worked with really inspires you, you should say it. But if there's somebody else, you know, somebody that inspires you that you've really worked with.
I want to, you know, it's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, like I mentioned, like I used to work at Treyarch. You know, I was a lead designer there, and there was a guy that I worked with. His name was Jason McCord, and he was like a really good level designer. You know, he's like I think he was like a senior designer when I was there, and we like worked on a bunch of stuff together for a number of years. And then he went over to Infinity Ward and then went over to Respawn when that happened. And now he's a design director on Apex Legends. And I'm just like, it's so cool to see that happen. Like, cause I remember when he first started, like I think he was only like, maybe he came in like a year after I did. Like he was right at Gray Matter, right when we were turning into Treyarch. And he's super cool dude, super awesome. And I know he hated social media and now he's like growing in, he's doing all this social media stuff now. He's doing interviews. It's really cool to see him like kind of to like grow into that and be like this awesome dude because he's already an awesome dude, but to kind of realize his full awesome potential has been great to watch. So Jason McCord is my answer. He'll probably hate me saying that too, but he'll be embarrassed.
Anyone else? Designer? Yes, go ahead.
She probably doesn't remember me, but Robin Haneke. She was my games professor back when I was still in college, and it was one of the first classes that really ignited my passion for games. And she is the CEO of Phenomena. I pronounce things bad, but anyways, she was one of the brilliant minds behind the game Journey and is currently working on a cool VR game called Luna. And I really admire her. She's so confident and cool and has like amazing, brilliant things in her head. And I love her.
Journey is amazing. You should play it if you haven't. Wow.
Anyone else?
You have one.
Yeah, so this is not really game design, but the question said designer or developer. So I'm gonna name my good old friend Yo-Yo Dude 1. That's his screen name. I work with him on a game called I Wanna Maker, which is like a technical project for like making a Mario Maker game. It's on Steam. You can play it for free if you want. But we're doing it's all our programming and design decisions and nitty-gritty Mario Maker level editor stuff that is not really an artistic game, but it's more of a technical game. But he's just friendly to work with. We share a vision. We make compromises all the time because there's just so much things to design. You need a lot of attention to detail when we're making I Wanna Maker because there's so many little UI elements and you have to get it right. But at the same time, he does not. He doesn't do the doorknob thing we talked about earlier. So it's like a good mix. Yo-Yo, if you're watching this or someone showed it to you, yeah.
And I guess for me, it would be Terrence Yee. Thanks, Terrence. I think everyone Terrence has talked to or touched in like the game development world loves him. He's just an inspiration, and he's very humble about what he does. And even though he's like an amazing designer all around, and he's kind of like the person who mentored me when I first started and really like made me the type of designer that I am. And I think that I can't appreciate that any more than like, you know, there's no words to put into how much I appreciate his time and effort and patience.
All right, so Ambler11 asks, what are good majors to get into for college when wanting to pursue a career in game design?
I think computer science is good, but that's also very specialized and can be a bit overkill. I think a lot of places now are offering kind of like, I don't know what to call a degree. It's almost like a computer science light, or it's like a mixed media degree or something like that. Those are probably worthy. I mentioned psychology. That might not be a major, but it's worth taking some. And then, you know, obviously some places now offer like full on like game design courses. So those would be probably, I would hope they would be pretty good, but I can't speak to them personally. So.
Yeah, I actually went through one of those programs.
And?
Yeah, I went to UC Santa Cruz, and they have their own games and playable media department and specialized majors. But honestly, I don't think it really matters what you choose as a major as long as you complete college. There's somebody on my team that has an economics major, and he's doing the same design work that I am. So as long as you can do the thing and prove that you do the thing and vouch for yourself about doing the thing, people will believe that you can do the thing and hire you to do the thing.
And I think it also matters, like, what kind of design do you want to do? Like, somebody in economics could be like a great monetization designer. You know what I mean? So it sort of depends on, yeah, like what you like to do. Do you like level design? Do you like character design? Do you like mechanics design? Like story design? You know, whatever, narrative design.
Yeah, it's important to pay attention to what you like to do and can see yourself doing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best ways, if you're looking specifically to go to school and college for something, think of where you want to be, like what department you want to be. Like I think Jesse gave quite a few different examples there. You can look up job applications for those and what are the requirements, right? If they're looking for a specific type of degree, go get that degree. Not that that's necessary, but if you are interested in going to school first, maybe it's something that you're getting pressured from a parent or something like that. But I think there's a lot of value in going to school too. You learn a lot of like time management, you learn a lot about documentation, communication, writing skills, things that are going to be very valuable for you no matter what field you go. I mean, I went to healthcare administration, music theory, so you never know.
And also you have to remember that people, when they look at your resume, they just look at a piece of paper. So if they decide that education is something that's important to them, that might be the thing that tells like you're like, oh, well, they didn't go to school. And you don't have the network or the whatever to back it up. That's going to be one extra nudge in your favor if you do have some kind of degree. Put that out there. All right, so we're running out of time, but there's a question by Eduardo2231, the Batman. Does it really take a lot of math to be a game designer? This
is kind of already answered in chat. Someone said, not for game design specifically, but if you're doing game programming, yes, you'll use trigonometry and all that good
Depends on the
stuff.
design you're doing. I think there's a lot of math, but you can also get like functions and cells and stuff that can do the math for you. But at the same time, I do think there's, in my mind, there's a lot of math that goes into it.
Oh, statistics. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, not statistics, but like balancing combat. Like if you think about like weapons and all the different weapon designs, like you're gonna have to balance like what the rate, the rate of fire, the cone of fire, that there's like so many different elements of that you're gonna have to do math for. Otherwise, you'll just have one really powerful weapon and a bunch of.
Yeah, I think it's all dependent on like at least on Call of Duty, like designers they kind of do like two function. Well, there's lots of functions, but a lot of them are like scripters, right? And so they write code and stuff, but they're doing like vector math and like linear algebra and stuff. Now some of that, a lot of it, you can honestly just kind of rip off of other scripts that you find and kind of cobble things together. But the really good designers will create their own stuff from scratch, and so they know how to like do those math things kind of on their own, or at least like do enough on their own to get some scaffolding, so they can go to a programmer and go, okay, here's what I got, let's work through it, and then the programmer can laugh at your terrible math skills, but then they'll get you through it. So.
I mean, you could start like obviously like you can also do like apprenticeship or a junior design position and move your way up. But I'm looking at like senior level position. Like you're gonna have to know math like
to some degree, yeah, for sure.
All right, so we're out of time, so we're gonna wrap up with one last question. Practice and failing until it works helps us become better creatives. What are some things you do or have done to become a better game designer?
I do want to say that you could be a narrative designer and not have to do math.
Yes.
I was like, wait a minute, I just thought about something.
Or level designer. You don't really need math for level design.
I feel like there is an element of math for level though.
Yeah. Getting better, you said, was the question?
Yeah. So
how to improve?
How did you get good?
Just lots of practice. Yeah, it's just failing really and getting used to failure but there's other stuff you can do. Like you can, a lot of it, I think designers are naturally curious people. So you just kind of start to point your curiosity towards things that kind of can better your craft, I suppose. And so I kind of mentioned the psychology stuff earlier. Like there'll be days when I'm like, I don't have that much to do today. Let me just go look and see go get a refresher on some psychology stuff. Is there anything new that's going on? GDC is obviously a really good resource. So there's lots of great, whenever we can go to GDC again, but it's great for networking. Yeah. Is it going to be like I guess there's virtual stuff too, but meeting people, networking, that was already mentioned. But then there's just great, basically they're like it's like going to college, right? For game design or game development in general. So you go to this, you pay people a lot of money, but then you get all this great information out of it. And kind of, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because they're very specific into their problems. So you kind of have to look at it through the lens of like whatever you're trying to make and how can I pull stuff from that. But, there's so many great talks put on by all kinds of studios, mobile, AAA and everything, indie, you name it, right? They're all going to be there talking about what kind of issues they ran into and what kind of things made them successful. And then the thing that I've been into lately is just accessibility. And maybe this is because I'm more into mobile stuff, but a lot of my background is like in these big games, and I always kind of am fascinated why so many people are able to play them and kind of start to break down the elements of design of like why is Call of Duty such a popular shooter, things like that. So I read a lot about and try to discover more about accessibility and like try to get more people to play the game and like how can more people access the game that we're making.
I think you covered a lot.
Get good advice?
I would say there's no substitute for just making a lot of things. And there's a good article by Derek Yu, which is just look up all the articles by Derek Yu. They're good reads if you want to know stuff. But it's like there's no substitute for finishing a game, seeing feedback on it, and also getting your own feedback. Like, oh, this art was really hard, or like these level designs didn't turn out very well, and then you apply it to the next game. But you wouldn't have been able to apply it had you not finished the game, because you would have moved on and not learned all the lessons yet. So just getting as many games out. I mean, still make good games, but try to make good games. But there's no substitute for getting your hands dirty.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Just do the thing. Doing the thing can just be replicating your favorite games too. Like when I was starting out in mobile development, I was in a boot camp that had me make my own Flappy Bird and make my own Angry Bird and then make twists to that existing thing.
Yeah.
Everyone's
just
going to
gonna-
start somewhere.
I'm just gonna say game jams.
Yes, game jams are a great way to do that.
Not just because I'm obsessed and love them a lot, but they're also fun.
One of these days.
So yeah, and also on that note, it's a good segue into, if you are interested in game development, IGDA does all sorts of stuff. We have like this wonderful panel with these wonderful people. We've started doing Zoom Mixer, so you can actually meet other people with a webcam and a microphone, and you'll get to see people, and it's awesome. And they're very friendly. We also have a Discord that is pretty
You don't
active.
even need a webcam and a microphone. You could just have your phone.
Oh, well, yes.
There you go. Yeah.
Your phone already
Yes.
has a camera and a microphone on it. You're good.
Yes, exactly. And then the Discord, we have a pretty active community that is amazing, and hopefully somebody will be able to link that is watching.
So,
Well,
yeah.
because I'll be like too slow. I can't do the two
You
things.
can
at the
also go
same
to igdasandiego.org/Discord.
That's it. See, yep, perfect. And coming up next, we have a Jackbox mixer. We're going to be playing games together, so it'll be a less formal meeting of people, which will be pretty fun. And that date is something that I should have wrote down.
I don't think we've announced it yet.
Oh, it's coming.
Coming soon.
Yeah, coming! Hooray! Hooray!
Yeah.
Don't have to know the date officially.
But I think it will be September 17th. I
Yeah,
believe so.
that sounds right.
From like 7 to 9. Oh, no, nuts.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
I even made the asset for this. I did the little thing and I don't remember. But hey, it's all good. So it's a bunch of volunteers that we're doing good stuff and trying to help out people. So yeah, I guess thanks for stopping by, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your design week and check out more awesomeness that's going on. Thank you
Yeah,
all.
thanks for watching.
Yep, thanks.
Bye.
It's really fun
everyone.
being on a panel.
Thanks for having me.